Clipperton is 800 miles away from the nearest coast in Mexico.
In the late 19th century, countries fought for ownership of it for a rare resource the island possessed.
One of the most remote places on Earth. We just don't know that much about it.
It's such a unique place, this ring, this atoll. It's got a very complicated history.
Clipperton Island is a fascinating and remote location that often escapes notice. Despite its rich biodiversity and powerful ocean currents, it has a history marked by shipwrecks and harsh weather conditions. Various countries, including France, the United States, Mexico, and the United Kingdom, have laid claim to sovereignty over the island throughout history. In an intriguing twist, a particular crew once found themselves stranded on Clipperton Island in an attempt to establish full ownership. Join us as we explore the remarkable story of spending 6 years in abandoned island of Clipperton. Victoriano Alvarez abuses of 15 women on Clipperton Island. Clipperton Island was a place anyone but the politicians could dread. Though rich in guano and other natural resources, it was a place with hard conditions where one was prone to diseases like scurvy and rickets. More so, the island rejected visitors as it was difficult to sail to the shores and from the shores into the ocean. This made those who lived on it feel isolated and abandoned. A lot happened on island, and it's time to be revealed. In 1905, the Mexican government renegotiated a treaty with the British Pacific Islands Company, establishing a military garrison on the island of Slander and setting up a lighthouse at the request of Mexican President Porfirio Diaz. Captain Ramon Arnau was appointed governor of Clipperton. At first, he was reluctant to accept the position, believing that it would mean expulsion from Mexico, but he relented when told that Diaz personally chose him to defend Mexican interests in an international conflict with France. It was also noted that because Arnau spoke English, French, and Spanish, he was well equipped to help protect Mexico's sovereignty in the region. He arrived as governor of Clipperton later that year. Until 1914, the island was home to about 100 men, women, and children, shipped every 2 months from Acapulco. As the battles of the Mexican Revolution escalated, regular care visits were interrupted, and residents were left to fend for themselves. On February 28, 1914, the schooner Nokomis was wrecked at Clipperton. With the lifeboat still sailing, 4 crewmen voluntarily rowed to Acapulco for help. The USS Cleveland arrived months later to rescue the crew. While there, the captain offered to transport the colony survivors back to Acapulco. Arnau refused because he believed a supply ship would arrive soon. In the year 1917, all but 1 male resident had died. Many succumbed to scurvy, while others, including Arnau, died trying to catch a passing ship to seek help. Light tourist Victoriano Alvarez was the last man on the island with his wife and children. Alvarez proclaimed himself king and began a campaign of rape and murder. He would take a woman to himself every night. These women had lived every day, harassed and shaken in fear. His time of reign elapsed when he got killed by his favorite victim, Tirza Rendon. Almost immediately after Alvarez's death, the U.S. Navy gunboat Yorktown picked up 4 women and 7 children, who were the last survivors, on July 18, 1917. Clipperton Island, known as Clipperton Atoll, and previously as Clipperton's Rock, is an 8.9 square kilometers uninhabited French coral atoll in the eastern Pacific Ocean. The only French territory in the North Pacific, Clipperton is 10,675 kilometers from Paris, France, 5,400 kilometers from Papeete, French Polynesia, and 1,280 kilometers from Acapulco, Mexico. The coral island is located at 10 degrees and 18 minutes north, 109 degrees and 13 minutes west in the East Pacific, 1,080 kilometers southwest of Mexico, west of Nicaragua, 2,545 kilometers west of Costa Rica, and 2,390 kilometers northwest of the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. The nearest land is Socorro Island, about 945 kilometers to the southeast in the Revilla Gigedo archipelago. The nearest French-owned island is Hiva Oa in the Marquesas Islands of French Polynesia. Despite its proximity to North America, Clipperton is often considered one of the easternmost points of Oceania due to being part of the French Indo-Pacific and to commonalities between its marine fauna and the marine fauna of Hawaii and Kiribati's Line Islands, with the island sitting along the migration path for animals in the eastern tropical Pacific region. The island is the only emerging part of the East Pacific Rise and the only feature in the Clipperton Fracture Zone that breaks the ocean's surface, and it is one of the few islands in the Pacific that lacks an underwater archipelagic apron. The atoll is low-lying and largely barren, with scattered grasses and a few clumps of coconut palms. The land ring surrounding the lagoon measures 1.7 square kilometers with an average elevation of 2 meters, although a small volcanic outcropping, Clipperton Rock, rises to 29 meters on its southeast side. The surrounding 3.7 square kilometer reef hosts an abundance of corals and is partly exposed at low tide. In 2001, a geodetic marker was placed to evaluate whether the land was rising or sinking. Clipperton Rock is the remains of the island's now extinct volcano's rim. Because it includes this rocky outcropping, Clipperton is not a true atoll and is sometimes referred to as a near atoll. The surrounding reef, in combination with the weather, makes landing on the island difficult and anchoring offshore hazardous for larger ships. In the 1940s, American ships reported active problems in this regard. When Snodgrass and Heller visited in 1898, they reported that no land plant is native to the island. Historical accounts from 1711, 1825, and 1839 show a low grassy or suffrutescent flora. During Marie-Hélène Sachet's visit in 1958, the vegetation consisted of a sparse cover of spiny grass and low thickets, a creeping plant, and stands of the coconut palm. This low-lying herbaceous flora seems to be a pioneer in nature, and most of it is believed to be composed of recently introduced species. Sachet suspected that Heliotropium curasavicum and possibly Portulaca oleracea were native. Coconut palms and pigs were introduced in the 1890s by guano miners and were still present in the 1940s. The largest coconut grove is Bougainville Wood on the southwestern end of the island. On the northwest side of the atoll, the most abundant plant species are Cenchrus echinatus, Seta rhombifolia, and Corchorus estuans. These plants comprise a shrub covering up to 30 centimeters in height, intermixed with Eclipta, Philanthus, Solanum, and the taller Brassica jonesea. The islets in the lagoon are primarily vegetated with Cyperacea, Scrophulariacea, and Ipomoea pescaprae. A unique feature of Clipperton is that the vegetation is arranged in parallel rows of species, with dense rows of taller species alternating with lower, more open vegetation. This was assumed to result from the trench digging method of phosphate mining used by guano hunters. The only land animals known to exist are two species of reptiles, the Pacific stump-toed gecko and the copper-tailed skink, bright orange land crabs known as Clipperton crabs, John Garthia oceanic before 2019, classified as John Garthia planta, birds, and ship rats. The rats probably arrived when large fishing boats wrecked on the island in 1999 and 2000. The pigs introduced in the 1890s reduced the crab population, gradually allowing grassland to cover about 80% of the land surface. The elimination of these pigs in 1958, the result of a personal project by Kenneth E. Stager, caused most of this vegetation to disappear as the population of land crabs recovered. As a result, Clipperton is virtually a sandy desert, with only 674 palms counted by Christian Jost during the Passion 2001 French mission, and 5 islets in the lagoon with grass that the terrestrial crabs cannot reach. A 2005 report by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Southwest Fisheries Science Center indicated that the increased rat presence had led to a decline in both crab and bird populations, causing a corresponding increase in vegetation and coconut palms. This report urgently recommended the eradication of rats so that vegetation might be reduced and the island might return to its pre-human state. In 1825, Benjamin Morrill reported finding green sea turtles nesting on Clipperton, but later expeditions have yet to find nesting turtles there, possibly due to disruption from guano extraction, as well as the introduction of pigs and rats. Sea turtles on the island appear to have been injured due to fishing practices. Morrell also reported fur and elephant seals on the island in 1825, but they have yet to be recorded by later expeditions. The island has a tropical oceanic climate with average temperatures of 20 to 32 degrees Celsius and highs up to 37.8 degrees Celsius. Annual rainfall is 3,000 to 5,000 millimeters, and the humidity level is generally between 85 and 95%, with December and March being the drier months. The prevailing winds are the southeast trade winds. The rainy season occurs from May to October, and the region is subject to tropical cyclones from April to September. But such storms often pass to the northeast of Clipperton. In 1997, Clipperton was on the path to the start of Hurricane Felicia and Hurricane Sandra in 2015. In addition, Clipperton has been subjected to multiple tropical storms and depressions, including Tropical Storm Andres in 2003. Surrounding ocean waters are warm, pushed by equatorial and counter-equatorial currents, and temperature increases are being seen due to global warming. Clipperton is a ring-shaped atoll that completely encloses a stagnant freshwater lagoon. It measures 12 kilometers in circumference and is 720 hectares in area. The island is the only coral island in the eastern Pacific. The lagoon is devoid of fish and is shallow over parts of the eroded coral heads, but contains some deep basins with depths of 43 to 72 meters, including a spot known as Trou Sans Fond, with acidic water at its base. The water is almost fresh at the surface and highly eutrophic. Seaweed beds cover approximately 45% of the lagoon's surface. The rim averages 150 meters in width, reaching 400 meters in the west and narrowing to 45 meters in the northeast, where sea waves occasionally spill over into the lagoon. 10 islets are in the lagoon and 6 are covered with vegetation, including the Egg Islands. The closure of the lagoon approximately 170 years ago, and the prevention of seawater from entering the lagoon have formed a meromictic lake. The lagoon's surface has a high concentration of phytoplankton that varies slightly with the seasons. As a result, the water columns are stratified and do not mix, leaving the lagoon with an oxic and brackish upper water layer and a deep sulfuric anoxic saline layer at a depth of approximately 15 meters. The water shifts, with salinity rising and pH and oxygen quickly decreasing. The deepest levels of the lagoon's record waters are enriched with hydrogen sulfide, which prevents the growth of coral. Before the lagoon was closed to seawater, coral and clams survived in the area, as evidenced by fossilized specimens. Studies of the water have found that microbial communities on the water's surface are similar to other water samples from around the world, with deeper water samples showing a great diversity of bacteria and archaea. In 2005, a group of French scientists discovered 3 dinoflagellate microalgae species in the lagoon: Peridiniopsis cristata, which was abundant; Durinschia baltica, which was known to exist previously in other locations but was new to Clipperton; and Peridiniopsis cristata var tubulifera, which is unique to the island. The lagoon also harbors millions of isopods, which are reported to deliver a painful sting. While some sources have rated the lagoon water as non-potable, testimony from the crew of the tuna clipper MV Monarch, stranded for 23 days in 1962 after their boat sank, indicates otherwise. Their report reveals that the lagoon water, while muddy and dirty, was drinkable despite not tasting very good. Several of the castaways drank it with no apparent ill effects. Survivors of a Mexican military colony in 1917 indicated that they depended on rain for their water supply, catching it in old boats. During World War II, American servicemen on the island had to use evaporators to purify the lagoon's water. Aside from the lagoon and water caught from rain, freshwater sources are yet to be discovered. There are several claims to the first discovery of the island. The earliest recorded possible sighting is January 24, 1521, when Portuguese-born Spanish explorer Ferdinand Magellan discovered an island he named San Pablo after turning westward away from the American mainland during his circumnavigation of the globe. On November 15, 1528, Spaniard Álvaro de Saavedra Cerón discovered an island he called Isla Madanos in the region while on an expedition commissioned by his cousin, the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés, to find a route to the Philippines. Although both San Pablo and Isla Madanos are considered to be possible sightings of Clipperton, the island was first chartered by French merchant Michel du Bocage, commanding La Découverte, who arrived at the island on Good Friday, April 3, 1711. He was joined the following day by fellow ship captain Martin de Chassiron and La Princesse. The island was named Île de la Passion, Passion Island, as the date of rediscovery fell within Passiontide. They drew up the first map of the island and claimed it for France. In August 1825, American sea captain Benjamin Morel made the first recorded landing on Clipperton, exploring the island and making a detailed report of its vegetation. The common name for the island comes from John Clipperton, an English pirate and privateer who fought the Spanish during the early 18th century and is said to have passed by the island. Some sources claim that he used it as a base for his raids on shipping. After it declared independence in 1821, Mexico took possession of the lands that had once belonged to Spain. Spanish records noted the island's existence as early as 1528, so the territory was incorporated into Mexico. The Mexican Constitution of 1917 explicitly includes the island, using the Spanish name La Pasión as Mexican territory. This would be amended on January 18, 1934, after the sovereignty dispute over the island was settled in favor of France. Clipperton was documented by French merchant explorers in 1711 and formally claimed as part of the French protectorate of Tahiti in 1858. Despite this, American guano miners began working on the island in the early 1890s. As interest in the island grew, Mexico asserted a claim to the island based on Spanish records from the 1520s that may have identified the island. Mexico established a small military colony on the island in 1905. But during the Mexican Revolution, contact with the mainland became infrequent, most colonists died, and lighthouse keeper Victoriano Alvarez instituted a short, brutal reign as king of the island. 11 survivors were rescued in 1917 and Clipperton was abandoned. The dispute between Mexico and France over Clipperton was taken to binding international arbitration in 1909. Victor Emmanuel III, King of Italy, was chosen as arbitrator and decided in 1931 that the island was French territory. Despite the ruling, Clipperton remained largely uninhabited until 1944, when the U.S. Navy established a weather station on the island to support its war efforts in the Pacific. France protested, and as concerns about Japanese activity in the Eastern Pacific waned, the U.S. abandoned the site in late 1945. Since the end of World War II, Clipperton has primarily been the site for scientific expeditions to study the island's wildlife and marine life, including its significant mast and brown booby colonies. It has also hosted climate scientists and amateur radio D expeditions. Plans to develop the island for trade and tourism have been considered, but they have yet to be enacted, and the island remains mostly uninhabited with periodic visits from the French Navy. Final arbitration of ownership in 1931. Throughout Mexico's occupation of Clipperton, France insisted on its ownership of the island, and lengthy diplomatic correspondence between the two countries led to a treaty on March 2, 1909, agreeing to seek binding international arbitration by Victor Emmanuel III of Italy, with each nation promising to abide by his determination. In 1931, Victor Emmanuel III issued his arbitral decision in the Clipperton Island case, declaring Clipperton a French possession. Mexican President Pascual Ortiz Rubio, in response to public opinion that the Italian king was biased towards France, consulted international experts on the validity of the decision, but ultimately, Mexico accepted Victor Emmanuel's findings. France formally took possession of Clipperton on January 26, 1935. In April 1944, the USS Atlanta observed Clipperton en route to Hawaii. After an overflight of the island by planes from the USS Detroit and USS Nevada to ensure Clipperton was uninhabited, the USS Argus departed San Francisco on December 4, 1944, with aerological specialists and personnel, and was followed several days later by the USS LST-563 with provisions, heavy equipment, and equipment for the construction of a U.S. Navy weather station on the island. The sailors at the weather station were armed in case of a possible Japanese attack in the region. Landing on the island proved challenging. LST-563 was grounded on the reef, and the salvage ship USS Seas was brought in to help refloat the ship, but it too was grounded. Finally, in January 1945, the USS Viking and USS Tenino could free the seas and offload equipment from LST-563 before it was abandoned. Once the weather station was completed and sailors garrisoned on the island, the U.S. government informed the British, French, and Mexican governments of the station and its purpose. Every day at 9 a.m., the 24 sailors stationed at the Clipperton weather station sent weather balloons to gather information. Later, Clipperton was considered an airfield to shift traffic between North America and Australia, far from the front lines of the Pacific Theater. In April 1943, during a meeting between President Roosevelt of the U.S. and Avila Camacho of Mexico, Mexican ownership of Clipperton was raised. The American government seemed interested in Clipperton being handed over to Mexico due to the importance the island might play in both commercial and military air travel and its proximity to the Panama Canal. Although these talks were informal, the U.S. backed away from any Mexican claim on Clipperton, as Mexico had previously accepted the 1931 arbitration decision. The U.S. government also felt obtaining a military base on the island from France would be easier. However, after the French government was notified about the weather station, relations on this matter deteriorated rapidly, with the French government sending a formal note of protest in defense of French sovereignty. In response, the U.S. extended an offer for the French military to operate the station or to have the Americans agree to leave the weather station under the same framework previously agreed to with other weather stations in France and North Africa. There were additional concerns within the newly formed provisional government of the French Republic that notification of the installation was made to military and not civilian leadership. French Foreign Minister Georges Bidault said of the incident, "This is very humiliating. We are anxious to cooperate, but sometimes you do not make it easy." French Vice Admiral Raymond Finard requested during a meeting with U.S. Admiral Lyle A. Davidson that civilians be given access to Clipperton and the surrounding waters. But the U.S. Navy denied the request because there was an active military installation on the island. Instead, Davidson offered to transport a French officer to the installation and reassured the French government that the United States did not wish to claim sovereignty over the island. During these discussions between the admirals, French diplomats in Mexico attempted to hire the Mexican vessel Pez de Plata out of Acapulco to bring a military attaché to Clipperton under the cover story that they were going on a shark fishing trip. At the request of the Americans, the Mexican government refused to allow the Pez de Plata to leave port. French officials then attempted to leave in another smaller vessel and filed a false destination with the local port authorities, but were also stopped by Mexican officials. During this period, French officials in Mexico leaked information about their concerns in the arrival of seaplanes at Clipperton to the New York Times and Newsweek. Both stories were refused publishing clearance on national security grounds. In February 1945, the U.S. Navy transported French officer Lieutenant Louis Jean-Pierre to Clipperton out of San Diego, where he visited the installation and returned to the United States that afternoon. As the war in the Pacific progressed, concerns about Japanese incursions into the Eastern Pacific were reduced, and in September 1945, the U.S. Navy began withdrawing from Clipperton. During the evacuation, munitions were destroyed, but significant equipment was left on the island. By October 21, 1945, the last U.S. Navy staff at the weather station had left Clipperton. Illegal activities on Clipperton Island. During the night of February 10, 2010, the Sikkim Osprey, a Maltese chemical tanker, ran aground en route from the Panama Canal to South Korea. The 170-meter ship contained 10,513 metric tons of xylene, 6,005 metric tons of soybean oil, and 6,000 metric tons of tallow. All 19 crew members were reported safe, and the vessel reported no leaks. The vessel was refloated on March 6 and returned to service. In mid-March 2012, the crew from the Clipperton project noted the widespread presence of refuse, particularly on the northeast shore and around Clipperton Rock. Debris, including plastic bottles and containers, creates a potentially harmful environment for the island's flora and fauna. This trash is common to only 2 beaches, and the rest of the island is fairly clean. Other refuse has been left after the occupations by Americans 1944 to 1945, the French 1966 to 1969, and the 2008 scientific expedition. During a 2015 scientific and amateur radio expedition to Clipperton, the operating team discovered a package that contained 1.2 kilograms of cocaine. It is suspected that the package washed up after being discarded at sea. In April 2023, the Passion 23 mission by France's armed forces in the Antilles and the surveillance frigate Germinal collected more than 200 kilograms of plastic waste from the island's beaches, along with a bale of cocaine. The Sea Around Us project estimates the Clipperton EEZ produces a harvest of 50,000 metric tons of fish per year. However, because French naval patrols in the area are infrequent, this includes a significant amount of illegal fishing, along with lobster harvesting and shark finning, resulting in estimated losses for France of 0.42 euros per kilogram of fish caught. As deep-sea mining of polymetallic nodules increases in the adjacent Clarion-Clipperton zone, similar mining activity within France's exclusive economic zone surrounding the atoll may have an impact on marine life around Clipperton. Polymetallic nodules were discovered in the Clipperton EEZ during the Passion 2015 expedition. Strange facts about Clipperton Island. The Spanish discovered Clipperton Island in the 16th century. Nonetheless, power has changed hands multiple times throughout history and is currently under the administration of France. Despite its small size, Clipperton Island boasts a diverse ecosystem. It is home to a variety of seabirds, including red-footed boobies and masked boobies. The waters surrounding the island also teem with marine life, including colorful fish species and coral reefs. Clipperton Island is a coral atoll formed from accumulated coral reefs over millions of years. The island's circular shape results from the reefs forming a ring around a central lagoon. Beneath the coral reefs of Clipperton Island lie the remnants of an extinct volcanic mountain. The volcanic activity in the region millions of years ago led to the formation of the atoll as we see it today. Due to its lack of permanent inhabitants and limited human activities, Clipperton Island remains relatively untouched by human impact. This allows scientists to study its ecosystem in its natural state, providing valuable insights into marine and avian biology and ecology. Clipperton Island is often called one of Earth's most isolated landmasses. Its remoteness adds to its allure, making it a fascinating subject for explorers and researchers. Despite its challenging accessibility, Clipperton Island has become a sought-after destination for birdwatchers. The abundance of rare bird species and the opportunity to observe their natural behaviors make it a unique experience for ornithology enthusiasts. Clipperton Island experiences a harsh and unpredictable climate. It is subjected to frequent tropical storms and hurricanes, making it a challenging environment for human habitation and scientific research. Various countries have claimed sovereignty over Clipperton Island throughout history. This dispute was eventually settled in 1931, when France was recognized as the official administrator of the atoll. Clipperton Island has witnessed several shipwrecks over the years due to its treacherous coral reefs and strong ocean currents. Many ships have met their demise near the island, adding to its mystique and allure. What are your thoughts concerning the mystery of Clipperton Island? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to see more videos.